Two girls named Jillian and Blair are running through a deserted area. They only stopped when they were almost out of strength. The settlement they escaped from was quite far away. It seems there's no pursuit. The girls continued their journey. They have limited supplies of food and water. The sun and the map are their only guides. If everything goes according to plan, they will reach civilization in 3 days. The girls walked, surrounded by hills. They fled from a cult, specifically from its leader, Seth. In their childhood the girls were scouts, and some survival skills in the wild might come in handy. At night, the girls lit a fire and made camp. It was the first day of their new life. Jillian exclaimed that from now on she would live freely. These words were meant for no one else but Seth. Blair asked Jillian to behave more quietly. She couldn't shake off the feeling that Seth was nearby. Jillian reassured her, saying they had at least an 8-hour head start, so nobody would catch up with them. Upon hearing unfamiliar sounds, Blair panicked and extinguished the fire. She thought it was the sound of an approaching vehicle. The girls fell silent, listening intently. There was nothing but the sounds of the wilderness. Obviously it was just Blair's imagination. Jillian reignited the fire. Suddenly they remembered Delilah, who was the chief engineer in the Skylight commune and a loyal follower of Seth. Jillian was so enraptured by Delilah that she decided to join the cult as well. But there came a moment when even Delilah woke up and changed her mind. Delilah became concerned that Seth had placed surveillance cameras everywhere and started using punishments. She wanted to leave. Now Jillian doesn't even know why she ratted her out to Seth. As punishment, Delilah was expelled from Skylight, and she seemed to just disappear. Jillian took her place next to Seth. This was his secret. He used rewards and punishments to manipulate them. Seth locked them in their own minds. At night, Jillian dreamed of being in a cave with Seth. He, speaking in a hypnotic voice, asked her to repeat the same word over and over. This put Jillian into a trance. She woke up in the morning from this nightmare. Both girls are scared, although Jillian tries not to show it. The relationship between Jillian and Seth was built on a shared idea and emotional connection. Blair, on the other hand, was in love with him, but Seth was fixated on chastity and piety. All cult members were required to restrain themselves from worldly pleasures. Suddenly Jillian asked Blair if she knew about the marks. After Delilah left, Seth became obsessed with the idea of loyalty and made some cult members fast for a month, which landed them in the hospital. He also wanted to leave marks on the skin of some followers. After this, Jillian finally realized that it was time to leave. Blair feels anxious. She panicked when she turned around and didn't see her friend. But Jillian had been there all along. Deep down, Blair still blames Jillian for convincing her to join the cult some time ago. Blair was depressed, and Jillian assured her that Seth would provide salvation. However, Jillian was cruelly mistaken about him. Expressing this, Blair felt relieved. She had already forgotten what it was like to be sincere. As they walked up the hill and Blair asked Jillian for her hand, for a moment she saw Delilah instead of her and fell in fear, injuring her leg. At night, the girls made a rest stop again. Obviously Blair's injured leg had slowed them down considerably. When Jillian asked how it happened, Blair lied that the sun had just gotten in her eyes. Of course Jillian didn't believe her. Blair admitted to stealing Seth's laptop, which had all the recordings of the barrier therapy sessions with the cult followers. If the laptop falls into the hands of the police, it will be all over for Seth. However, Blair wants to delete her videos. She doesn't want anyone to see it. Of course the laptop was password protected. The girls tried to guess the password randomly. And Jillian was able to guess. It was the word aviary. Blair asked what that meant. Jillian replied that it was one of Seth's latest projects. Unfortunately the laptop almost immediately ran out of battery, so the girls didn't have time to delete anything. During the night, Jillian and Blair once again dreamed of Seth, who was asking them to repeat certain words. The next day as the girls continued on, Blair was limping. It seemed the journey would take 1 day longer than they had planned. They would have to ration their food and water. At some point, they noticed houses ahead. Blair was delighted, thinking they had reached civilization, but Jillian immediately suspected that something was amiss. The village appeared abandoned. The girls entered an old church where services were once held. On the wall was the inscription Calvary Hill, and Jillian was struck by a dreadful realization. Checking the map, she made sure they had been going in the wrong direction all this time. Now the girls were almost out of food and water. But if they hurried and saved their supplies, they could still reach their original destination in 2 days. The girls spent the night in one of the abandoned houses. Blair was awakened by an eerie creaking sound. Meanwhile, Jillian was fast asleep. Blair went to check what it was and at one point saw a silhouette outside the window. Nevertheless, Blair went outside. Suddenly Delilah appeared in front of her, offering to show Blair something. Delilah led her to a door behind which stood Seth. Seeing him, Blair was ready to scream in horror. It turned out Blair had been sleepwalking. She was awakened by Jillian's voice. Just a little more, and Blair would have fallen down the stairs. Blair couldn't stop thinking about it. Jillian promised that everything would be okay, and now they had to continue their journey. This would be their second attempt. On the way, Blair asked Jillian what she would do when it was all over. Jillian replied that she wanted to see the world, make up for lost time, and also find Delilah and ask for forgiveness. Blair's plan, aside from psychotherapy, includes revenge on Seth. She wants to wipe Skylight off the face of the earth. Suddenly Blair heard the sounds of a vibrating mobile phone. Jillian said it was impossible because their phones were with Seth. It was just Blair's imagination. At one point, she saw a body in the bushes, but Jillian didn't see anything like that. Nevertheless, the girls continued on their way. It was already getting dark. Jillian began to suspect they were going in circles again, but Blair, who was on the verge of hysteria, refused to give her the map. Sometimes Blair got the impression that Jillian talks like Seth. The girls continued walking, and it led them back to the village they had left earlier in the day. The only food they have left is a few pieces of candy bar. The girls were on edge and stopped trusting each other. Blair is convinced someone is leading them in circles, but Jillian disagrees. No one could move the sky and the sun, by which they were orienting themselves during the journey. Jillian suggested they agree not to be enemies to each other, then went to sleep. But Blair couldn't sleep and at one point heard the mobile phone again. Checking Jillian's pockets, she did indeed find a phone that had a message from Seth asking her to come back. There had been a lot of messages. Barely holding back her emotions, Blair returned the phone to its place. Suddenly Jillian opened her eyes, and as if under hypnosis, walked somewhere. Frightened Blair followed her outside. Speaking Seth's words, Jillian smeared her face with mud. Morning came. Blair demands that Jillian tell the truth. Jillian doesn't understand what this is about and denies having a phone with her. After searching Jillian's backpack, Blair indeed didn't find a phone. But the map, food and water were gone. There was nothing in Blair's backpack either, except a scrap of map with "Come Home" written on it. Blair recognized her handwriting, but she doesn't remember writing it. Blair went into hysterics. Jillian asked her to breathe slowly, trying to calm her down. Blair is convinced that Seth was here. Jillian reminded her that Seth doesn't know where they are. But that's not what Blair meant. Maybe Seth is in their heads, and all this is punishment. Seth has influenced their minds so much that physical escape won't solve anything. Blair is sure that if they leave Seth's laptop here, it will help them break free. Of course they will lose all evidence of what Seth was doing, but this is their only chance to leave the past behind. Eventually Jillian agreed. The girls continued their journey through the desert. The heat and dehydration caused severe dizziness. If they made a lap again, their chances of survival would tend to zero. It seemed like there was no end to the road. The girls were completely exhausted. The only thing that calmed them down was that the terrain looked unfamiliar, meaning they hadn't been here before. Suddenly Blair felt a sharp pain in her leg. This forced the girls to take a break. While Blair rested, Jillian was going to go ahead and look around. She promised to return before dark. Jillian just wanted to make sure they were on the right path. Meanwhile, Blair, who was about to light the fire, fell and discovered nearby the missing remnants of food in the water bottle. But how was this possible? Standing on the edge of a cliff, Jillian couldn't understand where they were. Suddenly someone's hand grabbed her, trying to pull down. Jillian desperately resisted until the hand let go of her. Jillian rushed to run back as she suddenly saw herself lifeless on the ground. Panicking even more, Jillian ran again and returned to the camp, where she found Blair, who was feeling very ill. Blair said Seth had returned the last candy bar, but when she took a bite, she realized it was actually poisonous berries growing in the desert. Blair had a tremor. Jillian made her spit it out. Fortunately Blair managed to do so. At night, the girls couldn't sleep for a long time. Jillian encouraged Blair, saying they managed to leave Calvary and break the circle, so they would soon get out. They decided to take turns sleeping to stay alert constantly. When Jillian asked Blair what she had seen earlier in the bushes, Blair said she didn't want to talk about it. At night, Blair woke up from anxiety and saw that the flames of the fire were colored. Jillian stood aside, unresponsive. There was the mark on her back left by Seth. Blair tried to wake Jillian up, who started speaking in Seth's words. He convinced Blair that Jillian had actually taken the laptop with her. If anyone sees the recordings, they'll understand who Blair really is. Upon hearing this, Blair burst into tears, and returning to the camp, checked Jillian's briefcase. Inside, just as Seth had said, was the laptop. Jillian only woke up in the morning, not remembering how she ended up here. Could it be that she too sleepwalks? Taking both backpacks, limping, Blair tried to leave, but Jillian quickly caught up with her. Jillian felt sorry for her lie, but if they had left the laptop there, nothing would have changed. Jillian also confessed that after Delilah left, she became the lead engineer at Skylight. Seth developed a new form of hypnosis called the aviary, which was supposed to bring all the commune residents even closer together. As a sign of loyalty, Jillian allowed Seth to leave the mark on her back. Blair doesn't remember this, but she has the same mark on her back. When Blair realized this, she burst into tears. Seth is indeed in their minds and is growing stronger, while they weaken. Jillian is convinced that if they escape from the desert, they will be free from this. The girls had nothing left but to continue their journey. Blair started hallucinating again, sensing Seth's presence nearby. To distract Blair, Jillian asked her to talk about her music group. Before, Blair used to play rock. Sometimes Jillian also saw Seth, just like Blair. He said that if they wanted freedom, they chose the wrong path. Suddenly the girls saw boot prints on the ground, and then a cabin. They immediately rushed there and began knocking on the door, asking for help. But when Jillian saw Seth's sweater on the clothesline, she was overcome by a bad feeling. The door was not locked, and the girls entered. There was no one inside, but most importantly there was water in the refrigerator. The girls felt very weak. Besides water, there were hot dogs in the fridge. At one point, Jillian's gaze fell on the gun on the wall. Exhausted, the girls fell asleep instantly. Blair screamed, opening her eyes. She had another nightmare. The girls were going to replenish their water and food supplies and continue their journey. While Blair was cooking hot dogs outside, Jillian turned on the laptop. Fortunately, there was electricity here. The laptop contained thousands of files. Seth recorded all the barrier therapy sessions. Jillian was interested in the videos with Delilah. She was angry at Jillian for denouncing her. But more than that, Delilah was concerned about Seth's desire to break the will of the commune members. Delilah disagrees with Seth's aviary project, considering it devilish. Seth brought Blair because he didn't want to leave Delilah alone. There is a risk she might escape. Blair continued to grill hot dogs, unaware that Jillian had just opened the videos of her and Seth's barrier therapy sessions. He asked Blair what was stopping her from being happy. He always asked this question to everyone. In tears, Blair said she considered Delilah a liar. Delilah wanted to tell everyone what was happening in the commune, so Blair had to silence her forever. Thus she took Delilah's life to protect Seth. Jillian didn't notice Blair entering. She said she wanted to tell the truth but didn't know how. Jillian doesn't believe that Blair did it. Most likely Seth made her believe it. That's the essence of the aviary, controlling their subconscious. But Blair knows exactly what she did, and now she has to live with it. With the laptop in her hands, Jillian ran outside when suddenly she heard Seth's voice. Jillian is sure that it was actually Seth who got rid of Delilah because he was afraid she would talk. After that, Seth used hypnosis to convince Blair of something she didn't actually do. Seth said that it wasn't him or even Blair who actually did it, but Jillian. She wanted to protect her leader, but then guilt overwhelmed her. Seth used the aviary to erase Jillian's memory because barrier therapy is an inefficient method that would take many years. Seth promised Jillian that if she returned, they would figure out what went wrong together and correct the mistake. When Seth hugged her, Jillian, who had had a sharp object in her hands all this time, took his life. Returning to the cabin, Jillian called out for Blair in a panic, but she was nowhere to be found. Then a terrible realization dawned on Jillian. Outside, lifeless Blair lay on the ground. All this time Jillian had been seeing Seth instead of her. By evening Jillian reached civilization. City lights appeared ahead. But Seth found Jillian before she was in the city. Seth intended to take Jillian back home, to the commune. He had the laptop again. When Jillian asked where Blair was, Seth replied that she had voluntarily left them because Skylight wasn't for everyone. Jillian, who remembered nothing, unquestioningly believed him. By this time Seth had already buried Blair. Jillian asked him how he found her. Seth replied that she hadn't gone anywhere. He set fire to the cabin, and they left together. In the final scene, we see Jillian and Seth recording a video, urging people to join their commune.